Welcome once again to CopBlue's I've Got Your Six. As always, we like to start out with a Marcus Aurelius saying, and today the saying is, that which is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bees. We'll let you think about that and see if you can find a connection between that and what we're saying today. One other thing I want to bring to your attention. Chase. I know this seems funny that people are trying to get the police dog out of the rescue pups, Paw Patrol people. I mean, seriously, do you have that much time on your hands to where you need to get a dog off TV because he's a cartoon policeman? Think it over. Today, my guest is Robert Stokes, the Honorable Robert Stokes, because he's a judge now. Do you ever wake up just feeling judgy? I'm just saying.
I have to.
I got you. Well, Robert Stokes is here today, and we're glad to have him on CopBlue's I've Got Your Six. And, you know, usually most police officers, if you watch a lot of cop shows, they have something against defense attorneys, and it's always an argument and a fight and a fuss. But most of the time, I got to be honest with you, there are very, very few attorneys that I know of that I have an outright dislike for. You're just like, you know, you're going to find people that are good in the business, and you're going to find people that are bad in the business. Whether they're cops, whether they're preachers, teachers, or in this case, an attorney. And Robert was kind enough to come on the show today to talk to us about some stuff that we're interested in. But first, before we get started here, I just wanted to know, Robert, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Robert Stokes. I'm originally from Darlington, South Carolina, right here in Darlington. And I operate the law office of Robert Stokes. It's primarily a criminal defense firm. I do a lot of criminal work, a great deal of personal injury also. And I'm also the municipal judge for the city of Darlington. I've been the judge here since I think around July 2017, so right about 3 years now.
Well, Robert, I've known you a long time. You've been around here a long time. I think when I first met you was, gosh, what year did you graduate from law school?
I graduated from law school in 2010.
2010?
Yeah.
I was in criminal investigations then. I can't remember what case it was that I came across you with, and we never mentioned anybody's name.
That's right.
Because, you know, we changed the names to protect the guilty and the innocent, so there we'll go from there. But anyways, known you for a long time. Always thought you were a pretty fair guy to me. You know, you always treated me with respect. It's kind of a two-way street.
That's right.
You treat me with respect, I treat you with the same. And, you know, that kind of goes along with anything. So, you know, the thing that just really burns a lot of police officers up is, you know, police officers getting sued all the time. You know, from the time I was in the academy until the time I retired in 2018, you know, one of the things that I used to tell police officers all the time is it's just part of the job. It's you're going to get sued. So, why do you think, in your estimation, Judge, do you think that most well-meaning officers get sued? Why do you think? I mean, what do you think is the primary reason?
You know, that's a great question. I think we can go on and on and on about why police get sued. I think, like you said, it's a part of the job, but, you know, I've watched it, and I want to talk about a few reasons I think they get sued. And again, we're not talking about that 5 to 10% of cops that just, you know, just go out and do something that's totally against what they should be doing.
Well, I agree with that. Let me just bounce off that for just a second. We're not talking about when a police officer goes out there and breaks the law, and egregiously breaks the law. We're talking about when a well-meaning officer is doing their job, and despite the fact that they're doing it the way that they think they're supposed to, they still get sued anyway. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about somebody that would intentionally hurt someone or go out of their way to somehow break the law. So I totally think we can agree on that. So go ahead, sir. What do you got for me?
Okay. The first thing is this. I think a lot of the officers, they're well-intentioned. They just don't know the policy. The departmental policies is what I'm referring to. For instance, if you're a K-9 officer and something happens on the street, whatever it is, and you put your dog on a person, I think what you need to know is, what does the department say about that?
Okay.
What should you do? The standard, if the standard is you do whatever is reasonably necessary to prevent a crime or to apprehend a suspect, that's what you do. But a lot of officers, they get the policies and they don't review them all the time, and they don't know. You go back and you write a report, and you say, hey, I did whatever was necessary to effect the arrest of the suspect, and then it's a problem. Because what happens is you have me or some other lawyer, and I go back and I read your report. The first thing I want to know is this officer following the departmental guidelines? And, your intentions were good. You did not have any malice in your heart, but you stepped away from what you should have been doing at the time. Okay. And that comes back to, you just gotta know it. You gotta know it. And another reason I think well-meaning officers get they get sued, training. Especially in a city like Darlington. Darlington is a small community. But the county is big, but it's a small community. And what happens is, say for instance, the police in New York City, he has thousands of interactions that the police in Darlington may never have. Right. So, if I was an officer, one of the things I would make sure that I do, look at programs like this, all the newsletters, all the things that are trending. Because it's everywhere. You can go and find about it. A lot of the officers are former military. They've been overseas with fellow soldiers, and then it's over. You come back and you get into the normal world. Well, you're in Darlington. Well, one of your buddies, he may be in Chicago. Another one may be in Atlanta. Pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, what are you guys doing? That they may be doing something that you're not used to or that you hadn't even heard of. Right. And so I think the training is important. The more you learn about the job, it makes it easier to diffuse potentially volatile situations.
I agree with that.
Also, another reason, the last reason I want to talk about well-meaning officers getting sued is this. Something happens on your beat, and you had no malice again. You're just doing your job. Right. You go back up. You write this report. Well, that person, you arrest them. They go to jail. Lo and behold, 2 weeks later, they file some type of complaint against you. Okay. Okay. So they come to me and they tell me, or they tell any other lawyer, you made the report. Okay. But your report is different from what the video was showing. Yep. And it may not be, you're writing a report, you've worked a 12-hour shift, and you're ready to go home. But your report is not really detailed. I'll give you a great example of this. Probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I'm defending this guy in a DUI. And so, here in South Carolina, the incident site must be recorded. Yep. Okay. So, they get this guy for DUI, they arrest him for DUI. But an exception to recording the incident site is this. You can say, hey, you go out in your police, and you're in your police cruise, and the camera's in on. So what you can do is write an affidavit and say, the camera was working, but when we got there, I didn't realize it was work. To my knowledge, it was working. Right. But on scene, for some reason, it didn't work. And you can cure the video not being on camera by writing this affidavit. So this guy comes in to me, and I get the discovery. And I'm looking at it, and I want to say this officer, he's one of the best DUI officers that I've encountered. He's just a good police. Right. But what happened was, he's out there working, and I failed to mention this. It's on it's at a checkpoint, so there's a lot of moving parts. Right. And, things are happening. So, lo and behold, he writes this affidavit. He says, hey, my camera was inoperable. So I get the video. I look at the video. theirs and one of his fellow officers, they're there and they're telling him, they're saying, hey, I can't see it because she's looking to make sure it's recording. But in his report, he writes, it just wasn't working.
Right.
Now, the case ended up getting dismissed, but the reason I'm pointing that out is it happens. So I think they have to really be thorough in what they put in their reports because it's going to be picked apart.
Oh, absolutely.
After the fact.
Absolutely.
And all of the time, I mean, if it's just a situation where a lot of officers respond, of course, you try to do what you should do. But a lot of these things happen, you don't even think twice about it. It comes up, your commander says, hey, Danny, come in here, I've got this complaint against you.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens then? So that's three things, like I said. I think you've got to know your police department's policy. What can I do? You've got to stay abreast of the most recent and effective trends in training,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure you review and go over your report.
Okay. Well, this is my opinion on it, especially when you're talking about videos. If the video's there, it's recorded. You need to use that video. You need to go back and review that video
Absolutely.
Before you write that report.
Absolutely.
I mean, you have a wonderful opportunity that you hadn't had in years past, and the newest officers don't even realize it because they've always had video. But I can remember back, 20 years ago when I was on the street doing reports, and our memory's not perfect. It's just not. And that video has really, really gone to help you a lot with preparing your incident reports, so you can get a very accurate accounting of what happened.
Exactly.
So, what do you think? And you've already really answered this question. What do you really think you can do to prevent that from happening? And I think you pretty much cleared that up by saying, hey, look, better training, a better idea of what your actual policies and procedures are to make sure that you're acting within those guidelines. Because I'm going to tell you, from having been a policeman for 20-something years and having seen my number of lawsuits, because everybody sees them, the first thing they're going to ask for is your policy and procedure. They're going to ask for that and say, okay, especially a chase. Were you following your chase guidelines?
Right.
And I think you've already pretty much answered.
One thing I do want to add to that, what can be done to prevent this from happening?
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're an officer, you have to almost, I say, and I'll explain, when you're working, you need to have an out-of-body experience. You need to treat every situation as if you're doing the job, but imagine yourself being the person that's out watching.
Right.
Because how it's going to be viewed is this: was it reasonable?
Right.
And what's reasonable to you may not be reasonable to 12 jurors.
Right.
So you want to do everything as if it's being recorded and somebody's looking. And I think I think it would serve police officers well to do that. And just as a practical matter, read as much as you can, look at the news. Don't make the same mistake you see all of these other people that, it becomes news.
Right.
You can learn from it. Also, I think what can prevent this from happening, and this is it's on topic, but it's I've been thinking about this a lot. I've noticed the turnover in police department is, I don't know the actual numbers, but I see officers come and go.
Yep.
And you've got new officers being trained. As I said, I'm originally from Darlington, and the police force I remember, just to be clear, nobody wants to get arrested.
Sure.
Nobody
wants to get arrested.
Nobody wants to get arrested.
A ticket.
But the old officers, and I'm not talking terribly long ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, they developed relationships in the community.
That's what you're supposed to do.
That's what you're supposed to do. And I don't.
That's good policing.
It's good policing. what it does is it doesn't make you seem like, hey, the only time we see this guy is he's coming to grab my child and, arrest him or give him a ticket.
That's why you walk through neighborhoods. That's why you knock on doors. That's why you make yourself approachable. You cannot be a leader in your community as a law enforcement officer if you're locked behind a door where people can't get to you. People have to have access to you. I agree with that 1,000%.
Right.
That's community policing.
And correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm a police officer, there's a certain section that I'm patrolling. I have a particular job, right? Or a particular area.
Agencies, yes.
Okay, so get out there and meet the people, talk to them, so there can be this trust between the community and the police. I think that would serve officers really well and prevent, them from getting sued.
I agree. Well, before we get to our next question, I'm gonna throw a note. Tell us a little bit about, where'd you go to school?
Well, as I said, I'm originally from Darlington. I went to Mayo High School, and
I remember Mayo.
Mayo.
I was there when Mayo was here.
Okay. I went to Voorhees College. That's in Denmark, South Carolina, and I got my law degree from the Appalachian School of Law. That's in Grundy, Virginia.
Oh, cool. All right, very good. And you said you graduated in 2010. Is that when did you pass the bar?
I passed the bar in 2010.
Oh, cool.
I'm licensed to practice in the state of Illinois and in South Carolina.
Oh, good, cool. Hey, man. So I guess the number one question that most police officers want to ask an attorney about this kind of stuff: what should I do when I get sued? I know what my answer would be. I want to know what yours is.
Okay. If I was a police officer, there's 3 R's I want to talk about. I think the very first thing you do is relax. Like you said, it's gonna happen.
Yep.
Do not, make rash decisions, go out and give statements until you got yourself together, you've calmed down. And as you said earlier, you go back, you review your videos, your notes, you talk to your officers who were there, and you present to your superiors what happened. And then you just have to trust the process. Because most of the time, whatever municipality or county you work for, there'll be somebody to represent you.
Oh, absolutely.
But and I'm glad you talked about it in the beginning. Why would I bring a defense lawyer or plaintiff lawyer in here? I think a lot of times people have this perception of it's an adversarial system.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be plaintiff versus defense.
But it doesn't mean we're adversaries.
That's right. I think, and a lot of people, they get it mixed up. We're all working together to try to make our communities better. I take no pleasure in seeing an officer get sued, having his family have to go through this, and I take no pleasure in seeing a defendant getting taken from their families for a long time. But everybody has a job to do.
Sure.
And we have to work together to figure out, how do we get this thing right?
I agree with you. And we talked about this in the past couple of shows with our 2 most recent interviews about the criminal justice wheel and how that works with the prosecution, defense, with all of that system, the police, the jail, the judiciary branch, all of it has to work together for that wheel to turn. And, everybody's got their role to play.
That's right.
And all of us are working, believe it or not, and most people will not believe this. Don't throw rocks at me when I say it, but the prosecution, the defense, the judges, the jailers, the police, we're all on the same team. We're all on the same team. So, when we're fighting with each other, that's when the merry-go-round breaks down. So, well, I'm glad you brought up about what to do when you get sued, because anytime you're going to get sued at a jurisdiction, you're going to have somebody that's going to represent you. And, the best advice that I can give, probably, which just springboards off of what you said, is, do what your attorney tells you to do.
Exactly.
If you've taken good, copious notes, if you've done your job correctly, yeah, they could rule against you. But at the same time, you can still show where you've done your due diligence to do everything that you're supposed to do. And sometimes, hey, which leads us to my last question. It's possible to get sued even if you didn't do anything wrong. So tell us about that.
Absolutely. It's absolutely possible to get sued even if you hadn't done anything wrong. But again, if you do all of those things we've talked about, you should be fine. It's just a part of the process. It's like me as a practicing attorney. We have a Supreme Court. They overlook lawyers in the state, and it's called the Office of Disciplinary Counsel. And anybody can write them and say, "Hey, Robert Stokes was my lawyer. He did X and he did Y and he did Z. And here's why he should be disciplined."
Right.
It's gonna happen. But and the same advice that I give, I'm giving today, I have to use it myself because it's not a fun thing to get grieved and somebody saying, "Hey, you did this and you did that," and you were trying to do everything to help them, but you've got to be able to, those 3 R's I told you, go back, relax, review, and report, and everything will be fine. And if you've done something wrong, if you didn't follow policy and procedure, if you didn't know the law, and you've infringed on someone's civil liberties, that's what the courts are for.
Right.
And somebody is going to call you to tax on it. Mm-hmm. But there's a way that those things can be avoided.
I totally understand. Let me ask you a question. You ever been PCR?
I have.
That sucks, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
Explain to them what a PCR is in South Carolina.
Well, what a PCR is, what happens is I've represented somebody and the case has been disposed of. It's come before the court and it's over. And that person, they come back and they say, "Hey, my lawyer was ineffective. He should have done this, he should have done that." And what I found is it's always the people you've tried your best to do.
No good deed goes unpunished. I agree.
It's just part of the process. Fortunately, it hadn't happened to me a lot. But the first time it happened to me, I almost, but I realized it's just a part of the job. And what it does, it makes you accountable.
And what PCR is post-conviction relief, is where a defendant who has lost, generally, will go after the attorney that represented them, saying basically that it's malpractice, for lack of a better way to put it.
Right.
And so even lawyers get sued, in a manner of speaking.
In a manner of speaking.
So, is there anything else you think any other nuggets that you could give to us to allow us some kind of insight on things that we can do to keep ourselves out of the proverbial civil suit hot water?
Certainly. I think, especially the young officers, you have to find a superior that you see, that you know is doing his or her job well, and follow them. Don't be afraid to ask them questions. "Hey, how should I do this? What would you do in this situation?" I mentioned to you earlier about David Weaver.
Yep, David Welsh, super good guy.
An old police in Darlington. I saw him arrest a lot of people, but he always did it without incident. And the reason was because he learned what to do. And so, you've got to get a hold of the old guys.
Well, there was a lot of guys from that era, because when I first came into working at that particular agency, a lot of those older guys were still around, and it's like George Hatchell. I don't know if you remember George.
I do.
George was tough, but nobody gave George a problem.
Right.
George said, "Get in the car." You got in the car.
That's right.
Because he commanded that kind of respect for one reason or another. And the same thing with David. He commanded a certain amount of respect. I mean, he knew everybody. He seldom had to fight and fuss with anybody. And that's the thing, a lot of police officers that first come out of the academy, they come out with a lot of piss and vinegar in, for lack of a better way of putting it. and they're like puppies. They got their nose in everything.
Right.
And that's where the older officers are there to act as their guardian angel and kind of show them the path. So I agree with that 1,000%. Well, thank you guys once again for joining us at CopBLue. Remember to like us, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and once again, we want to thank Robert Stokes, and we appreciate it. I know you've had other things to do today, but the most important thing that you can do at the end of every day is hit that clock and go home safe. So thank you once again from CopBLue. Good job, man. Good job.